Thank you for coming.
Okay.
This is Keisha Moore-Williams. She's from the Berks campus, and I'm Carla Rapp. I'm the Media Commons Campus Consultant for the Eastern campuses, and we do a mobile media pilot. We have about 57 devices university-wide, where we use an iPod Touch, and Karen Cackley and Shivani have both been participants of this. The premise is that students can film, edit, upload, and then give us feedback all from that device without having to go anywhere else. We have iMovie and GarageBand apps on there. We also have several different recording apps on there for video and audio. And we've been trying to, because we've had so many proposals, which we do take in a proposal process and then award them to the class that we can facilitate the most. But we've had so many that we do try to maybe swap them out. And if someone only needs it for half a semester, then give them to someone else for the rest of the semester. So we try to really address as many people as we can. But the idea is that it's not something maybe cosmetically perfect, but it gets the content across. It's kind of rough edits, but it's really there for the content and a learning experience, and something that can be watched in class maybe every week, every other week. Sometimes it is a final project, but in the case of Karen, she had labs that they would do pretty often. They put that on YouTube, and then the other students would be able to see how a lab was supposed to be done. So we usually give the iPods out at the beginning of the semester, give a little bit of training, maybe come back if they need any extra support throughout the semester, but really it's kind of to see how intuitive that device is for them. And then we do a focus group and collect them back and wipe them clean and everything at the end of the semester.
We don't pass them out. Are they pretty locked down? When you put the apps on there, or are they?
We image them completely, and they are on they are enrolled in like a security type thing. So if anything happened to them, we could pretty much wipe them remotely and make them paperweight. So if that were to happen, we haven't really had any issues with that. More and more, we've had students wanting to use their own devices. So it's kind of changed the numbers a little bit for us. But personally, I've got a very different learning style than most, and I really think it covers so many places, because we were talking about in the last session that students can watch the video, they can hear the audio, and then if they're also reading something that complements it, it really covers so many different learning styles doing that. So, but Keisha is our iPod pilot for the eastern side of the state at Berks, and she does health communication. So I'm going to let her explain a little bit more about what a project looks like that we really would embrace and start using for a proposal.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys for coming. Well, what we ended up doing with this particular project and in this class, there are 2 health communication classes that I teach. The first one's a 200 level, and then the second one's a 400 level. And so, as a way to introduce the students to the content, to the theoretical framework, but then not just have them, read, take a test, to be able to say, how can I apply some of this in real-world practical application, real-world situations? I thought, well, this iPod pilot project might actually be a good fit. So I went through the proposal guidelines and filled out all of the information and said that I wanted my students to be able to conduct interviews of other students, and we've actually expanded a little bit. I told them they could include family members or whoever they want at this point, but about whatever that health topic was that connected with the lesson for that week. And so what we did, let's say for example, the one that they have recorded and have uploaded to the YouTube page right now dealt with college students and their sexual health, like their knowledge, their attitudes, and their behaviors. And so we spent a class period where we read 2 scholarly articles that dealt with this, and then we had our regular class discussion that broke down the content. Students engaged a bit. They gave their own opinions of what they agreed with, what they didn't, what they liked about the articles, what they didn't. And then the next day they had what I called iPod days, iPod project days. And this is when they went out and they could interview different folks. In many cases, they had already talked to a friend and had set up who they wanted to interview. In others, I told them if they were having trouble finding someone, let me know. And I had actually partnered with our certified nurse practitioner who teaches human sexuality at Berks. And so there were a number of students in her class that were more than willing to be interviewed. And so what the students then did was they came up with their own, I gave them some general framework, but they came up with their own questions that complemented the material, but that also just might help drive our conversation surrounding college students and sexual health when we would come back. So there were some students that interviewed people in their apartments, you know, and so there's a couch and there's books and all sorts of stuff in the background. There are others that went in private study rooms in the library, so it, you know, has a very professional feel, the whiteboard and the, you know, fading in and out and those types of things. Some people were like standing outside. So as Carla says, the aesthetic component of it was extremely different throughout. However, the content was so significant because what we found was that much of what the students were saying in the interviews correlated with what we had talked about, you know, the class period before with the articles. Something that really stood out to me was when I asked the students, we were talking about sexually transmitted infections or diseases, and I asked the students, you know, if I just put up this image, you know, and I put up a visual image of someone that had physical manifestations of an STD, versus if I go back to this clip from one of the students' interviews where it was a friend talking about another friend who had contracted an STD, who didn't get tested because she thought she was in a long-term monogamous relationship, and found out, you know, many years later that now she can't have children because of what this STD has done to her. They immediately were able to regurgitate that story to me rather than just the image. They're like, oh my gosh, take that off, you know, those types of things. So I thought that was a wonderful example, of how you could make this real, how I could take, you know, the textbook knowledge and do the teacher thing, but then bring in this visual representation from another college student, because a few of the folks in the class said, is that? And then they said the student's name. And they were like, oh, yeah. And so obviously you have to let the students know that, you know, this is probably going to be shown in your class. The way I positioned it is I told them that it wouldn't be shared outside of the Penn State system, and they, you know, they were fine with that. If it isn't on an open YouTube page or anything like that. I don't know if we're going to jump in, I guess, in regards to framework of where we put the videos.
Yeah, we have two different ways that we do it. So we have a private or unlisted YouTube channel that all the students upload everything there. And then we have a Facebook group that is closed. After the students have all joined, we close it, and we'll put all the YouTube information there for them. That's where they can give feedback pretty often about, you know, how they like the device, if they don't like the device, you know. Carla, we need an update. I'm having trouble with this YouTube, because it really is helpful to know if a lot of them start Facebooking saying, hey, I'm having a problem with this app, then I know, okay, maybe this is a bigger issue than like a user issue or something like that, you know, because sometimes, like in that case, like we had a student having trouble with YouTube the other day. It's quick fix, no problem. But if there's like all of them are saying there's a problem, then maybe there's an app update or something like that, and then I'll, you know, get to the campus as soon as possible and fix that. So that's where it is, and she's had really great success of giving them questions each week about the videos and what they're doing, and then they're giving us information back about like what kind of questions they asked, if it was hard coming up with those questions, you know, who they interviewed, what they learned about. Like it's been very, you know, it's showing that this is enriching their educational experience. It's not just technology for technology's sake. It's really, you know, again, reaching all those different types of learning styles. So.
Are the questions that you give every week reflective about the process? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
The in-class discussion deals with whatever that particular health topic is, but the questions that I have them respond to on Facebook is much more about the process.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, and it's on Facebook.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, we had to work with at the beginning, because it's a smaller class, and I'm actually very thankful that it's a smaller class, because it allows you to be able to connect with the students that aren't very tech savvy. And as I've mentioned prior to this project, I didn't have an iPhone, I didn't have an iPod, I didn't have an iPad, I didn't have anything. But I was still able to, you know, after one session in the summer, I came up and I worked with Carla and Marianne, and then she cleaned one off and gave it to me to play with a little bit before the semester started. And then she came in and did a classroom session. And, obviously I had to practice a little bit, but to be able to answer the basic questions and the ones that I wasn't sure of, like the two students that were having some trouble uploading and I couldn't figure it out for the one young lady either, by quickly just sending a message, she replied and she was able to have that issue fixed. One of the things that is very significant within this, though, was because it was a small group, we were able to change things that needed to be changed along the way, so that if I were to do something like this again, I think I have a more of a concrete framework. Someone mentioned in one of the earlier sessions about having those very clear rubrics or having those the guidelines where it is so clearly described, because you're already going to have a few students, like the ones that aren't necessarily that don't necessarily desire to do the extras, as they would say, that are going to give you a little bit of pushback. And the pushback is probably more so from the fear of, I don't know how to do this, or on top of learning this information, you're now asking me to learn how to use this technology.
And I think that's such a skewed perception. Like if they have an iPhone or a smartphone and they're comfortable doing video editing, comfortable with like something that's going to be handed in for a grade. It's all the time. I've seen that is a very sensitive point. And they want training, they want all of that there. And one thing is about the small class size, as she was saying, a lot of times with these types of projects, it kind of helps if they're in a smaller class, just because of the amount of devices we have, which obviously, like I said, is changing a bit now as students have their own. But like we've had quite a few where if they paired up, then we were able to accommodate them more. But if it's that every single student needs their own, and there's like 50-some kids in the class, that can be a little difficult to accommodate. So if you're looking to do a proposal, that's something to
What age group of your students?
They are sophomores, juniors, and a handful of seniors are in this particular class. One of the things that I found very interesting, and I didn't pay attention to this in the beginning, but I paid attention to it actually in Thursday's class, was that the students that aren't necessarily as tech savvy, I just asked the students that were. And I just gave her a few minutes. I said, okay, well, we're going to wrap up this part a little early. Can you come up and, like the one young man, I actually asked him from the beginning, because I knew that Carla had set up the information for us to go and upload on the YouTube page. But when I initially logged in, I was logged in as myself or something. And he was like, remember you told us we need to log in as this. And so I logged out and did that. And he just was like, just click here, do this, do that. And we had it up on the screen. And so everyone immediately had a clear understanding of what needed to be done, rather than me up there kind of bumbling around. And he seemed like, he enjoyed sharing the information. And so for the folks that didn't know, they were like, oh, okay, and they got it pretty quickly, and just went from there. A lot of people use their own devices. I thought that was very interesting.
We've had more and more now where I'm kind of like I was saying earlier, it's very difficult to not have an answer for an instructor that might have been like a runner-up for the semester, because they want to build their syllabus and they obviously have to build their syllabus around this. But I've had so many times now where we have like 5 extra devices. I had a theater teacher that was going to use them, and then the class got canceled. But where we have those 5 devices, that might be a class. If there's and who knows if they have a few more people that have their own iPhones or something that would be willing to use it. But I don't know that until I walk into the classroom, and we kind of have that understanding. So. If they can build it in that quickly, great. But obviously, usually they want to figure out everything and make everything aligned previous to the semester. So
Not a bad thing.
If they have their own devices, does iMovie cost money to download?
It's about $5 to $6 for the app. I mean, that's
they want to volunteer to use their own.
I haven't had anyone argue with that, because they can use the camera app, and then with the iMovie app, it's like $6. I actually did have one case at the Berks campus where he was aware that there was going to be the instructor was aware there was going to be several students that wanted to be able to use their own device, and I'm not really sure how he did this, but in his department, he was able to get iTunes gift cards for $10.
Oh wow!
And
that's what I was going to say. Do they have any kind of?
I mean, my thing is it's kind of like a textbook. You could put on the syllabus straight out. Like, if you want to use your device, fine, but you are responsible for making sure you have these apps.
Yeah.
And that's what you did when you came to
Just
my
like a
class,
clicker.
because there were a few that said, well, can we just use our own? And she said, you might have to download the app. It's going to cost you about $5 or $6. And I think the majority of them already had the app on there.
Mhm.
Where they were like, whatever,
Yeah, okay.
$6, it's fine.
Yeah.
So they would rather do that than carry around too. You know,
Mhm.
so.
And so forth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they can absolutely use it for like. I mean, I have it and I use it for like family videos. Or whatever, you know, so, yeah.
I've been in constant conversation about how technology, specifically mobile devices, can hinder face-to-face interaction.
Mhm.
But I think this is a perfect example of how it can encourage
Right?
extended collaboration
Mhm.
and extended discussion using a mobile
And
device.
especially where she's doing it, and it's like every week there's something. Like,
Yeah.
and too, like it's every week that they can be looking at
Yeah.
this, watching this, and then say, hey, wow, you know, I'll remember that story, you know.
Great.
I have a question about whether you're using the YouTube channel. You're putting Facebook. You're using the Facebook group for
feedback.
For
questions.
just questions and
Yeah. Is there interaction that you're fostering on the YouTube channel, or is
Like
it more of a
comments?
repository?
It's more of a repository
Yeah,
right
that's-
now.
that's how
And,
it is for
and then
my
they're
project,
and then they're
too.
watching in class.
Yeah,
so-
we're watching.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also, we were talking in the last session about VoiceThread use on there, and I mean, they can certainly comment on there. The question I wasn't really sure of, and I'd have to check on, was I know there's a VoiceThread app.
That's right.
I don't know how easy it is to upload
Yeah.
a piece of video through the VoiceThread app.
That's true.
You know, if that would be like we're on the iMovie app, they can send it right to YouTube.
Mhm.
No issue. So that would be my only concern, that there might be some sort of issue with that.
Yeah.
As I've only ever like done VoiceThread really on the desktop version, and the whole point is to make them not have to use the computer.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so.
Now, do you let them comment on the YouTube site then, or?
We haven't done anything extra with the YouTube site outside
They
of just
certainly could,
uploading
but
videos
it's
on there,
not
but I'm sure
really-
they could.
haven't. I mean, they're
haven't.
discussing it in class, or they're commenting
We
in
don't
class.
need
So.
Yeah, so we don't, like what I did the last round was I just picked a few, because those interviews were probably about 10 to 15 minutes. So I just picked a few, showed them in class, and then we discussed like what were the connections between what we had done in the last class and this one, you know, with the types of information that the folks were sharing. Whereas with the next one, I think we're going to have the interviews even shorter. Like I'm just going to have a person on the street where you just kind of go up, and we did patient-provider communication in Thursday's class. So when they go out on Tuesday would be an interview day. I'm going to tell them just, you know, you find faculty members, staff members, students, whoever, and ask them a few questions about this topic area. And I think by allowing them to be a little bit shorter, we then can get through more in class and can incorporate it back into the discussion. But one of the things we were talking about in that last group, and I think I was saying to someone earlier, is that ideally I think it would be really nice if we had had that repository or that spot where you have the videos, you have the comments in the discussion, you have everything in that same space, so that that portion of it would be a bit more user-friendly for the students. Because the handful that aren't Facebook fans, but they set one up specifically for the class,
Yeah.
I have to consistently say, go to Facebook and make sure you put your comments.
Certainly, we could do like where they put the video up on Facebook, and it's a closed
Right.
thing where
That's
they
right.
could then
Yeah.
they could just put everything right there.
Yeah.
You know, that's something to think about for the future for sure.
Mhm.
And I mean, again, the only worry that I have is if they can put the video, they can put the video up through the Facebook app. I
Yes.
think. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, you can. You certainly can. So. Yeah.
And there's
There's
another,
time to look.
yeah, with
Being
their
little
phones and
kids.
everything, that's true.
My
And I
kid did
mean,
poof.
part of it too is that she would be able to, you know, showcase that maybe later on,
Mhm.
and having everything in one place, no matter what you're using, is it's nice to have it all right there. So.
Now, did you pick Facebook over Yammer? And still, you can stay kind of.
Well, that's what I was going to
Yammer?
say. I
We
wonder
do
if you
use-
consider Yammer in
We
the
do
future.
use Yammer. I guess we've had, like, we used Twitter. My first pilot I did, I used Twitter. And it was kind of difficult because I've had students say one thing is too public, That's why I closed the Facebook groups, because they were saying they didn't want to comment
Yeah,
because
we have a Facebook.
it was too open.
Yeah.
Like they didn't want their friends to see in the news feed like that they asked about how to use something on iPod. So we closed it, and then the Twitter, we had trouble finding previous tweets. They just started disappearing on us. So it was I really didn't like that one yet. And then the other thing is with Yammer, it's kind of like she had a few, and I've had a couple of students in other classes where they don't have Facebook, and they created for this. But more often, the students in the class have a Facebook, whereas Yammer, most of them probably do not.
Yeah.
So it would be then having everyone create something new, get used to something new, where the majority know how to use Facebook, have Facebook, and could help the others that don't have that. So, instead of, to me, having to have everyone do it, it's only one or two.
And for the folks that didn't have it, they weren't too terribly resistant. Like they set it up specifically for this. And there was one young man that was like, that he was just so anti those types of things. I said, well, you can make up a fictitious name. That's fine. Just tell me what it is. And he says, well, can you just help me? And he came up after class and we just made it up. But, they were okay with it in the sense of, it was something that they needed for class. But it definitely was, something to think about.
Yeah. That's the best one that I've found because, like I said, it's very popular. Most people have it. And it's easy to track that way.
Do you have any to play for us? Do you want to show?
If we go to the YouTube page, I guess we could. But yeah, the one that I initially was trying to embed in the slides was the one that the student was having the most difficulty uploading. But then I later found out that she didn't do it all in her iPod. And that's one of the things that that I did. I went back and encouraged them to do from here on out. Is that because this is the iPod Media Project, we want them to do everything on there. And to be honest, her video is gorgeous, and it has like messages popping in and wonderful transitions. And when I was describing it, I said, "Did she do that on her iPod?" I said, "Oh, I don't know." I'll answer. And she said she did record the interviews on there, but I think she did some editing on her. On her.
That's been, I think, one of the biggest issues
To
that
try to
we've
get
had
them to focus.
is to make sure they stay using the iPod on it. Like they'll end up filming and they'll go over it. And while that's fine, and we certainly they can do, but the premise of the pilot is to see how they like the apps, and how that goes.
The only complaint that I got from any students on it, outside of just the initial, learning curve type thing, was the one person kept saying that it's just so small, my fingers can't
That's always
slide this part.
Always the
But
issue.
outside of that, they'll be comfortable now.
I'm always asked, can we have an iPad?
And that's what he kept saying. Well, even if I could use an iPad, I said just push through it.
Nice try. Nice try.
I'm just signing out of mine.
I think it's the CAS 253.
Yeah.
But it's definitely been a cool experience. Like it as I mentioned, I'm not the most tech savvy person. So initially I was like, okay, I can handle this. But it gave me sort of a motivation to then do a larger project in the spring. And that's what we were talking about a few minutes ago of incorporating public service announcements into the 400 level one, because I focus on health campaigns and that. And so, we were talking about some of the things that I need to piece together, whereas I think had I just jumped directly into the campaign ones, I probably would have been overwhelmed and just said, forget it.
Absolutely. So you give up some class time for them to do this. Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't mention that. That was something that I had to redo in the syllabus, I'd say probably about week 3, because initially I gave up a little bit of time, but definitely not enough time. And so it absolutely came across initially as this is an assignment on top of everything else. Whereas when I went back and redid certain components of the syllabus, I merged a few topics together to give me about three more class periods. And now, yes, as a class, so on Tuesday, we come to class as a group, we talk about different questions that we can go out and ask. Then I tell everybody to go ahead out, and then we report back about 10 minutes before class is over. and make sure everyone has uploaded them and they don't have any
Oh,
questions.
okay, so it's done during that class?
That's-
You
that's
don't
what
just give them the time to do it, you actually have them go do it during the class?
Well, that's what we're going to do this round. I didn't do that last round, and
Okay.
there were a lot of questions. So I think by trying it this way, I'm hoping that it'll go a little more smoothly. And I told them that we'll play it by ear as to how we do those classes.
And how many students do you have in there?
I think there are 15 in this one. Yeah, so it's a pretty nice workable size.
Okay, so which one
I think her content is the best, but that's the one I was describing.
do you, okay. Oh, she kind of has.
But her content was the best. This one talks about sexual health, basically.
So we'll just, I think we're getting ready to wrap
Yeah, I
up
think we
anyway,
have like 2
so
minutes, maybe.
we'll go ahead and.
Do you think college students today are well informed about sexual health? Why or why not?
I think college students are more informed about ways to prevent sexual health and happy when they know about condoms and the female condom, the male condom, they know about all these birth control pills and the shots and all the above.
One
But
thing
I
is they
don't
film
think it
this way with
necessarily-
this.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
that's
right.
one of the big things,
Yeah.
making sure they always remember to film this way instead.
It's not touched too much upon like people are still having unprotected sex all over.
I still make that mistake sometimes.
Do you
Yeah,
think
oh, yeah.
most
I think
college
it's just like a
students
natural
are more
instinct.
worried about an unplanned pregnancy or STDs?
Probably an unplanned pregnancy. I mean, I would be more worried about STDs, but people are out having unprotected sex all the time, and you check on Facebook, and there's people having babies all over. So I think that people are probably more worried about having unplanned pregnancies because it just doesn't involve the cells, it involves a whole other life form. So and plus it costs expensive money to get abortion and stuff, and it costs expensive money to raise a child. So they just realize, wow, what the heck.
Who do you think would be
See, so
most
there's a
susceptible
transition.
to STDs and
You
why?
can hear the sound is pretty good.
Probably the younger
So
generation,
in this, they could put a graphic here to say who she is.
usually when people have guys have STDs,
But I mean, like that's the kind of transition
don't show as much.
that's that's about the extent. So that's like where this is content based. You know, it does a nice job. It'll polish it up. But
Like for example, I know this one
if
girl,
you're looking
and
for a
she was dating this guy
documentary,
for 5
then a
years,
desktop
and
might be a little
he gave her
better.
chlamydia, and she didn't know. She didn't get any symptoms. Like she just kept living life, and after 5 years, they broke up, and she just randomly went to go get tested one day with a friend or something, and it turns out she had like really bad form of chlamydia, and now she lost one. She only has one ovary, and she can't have kids anymore. And she whenever I talk to her, she just talks to me about how much she regretted like everything about that. She should have just gotten tested because most the curable STDs, like chlamydia, and like gonorrhea, and all those, they get cleared up after 2 weeks. Like it's when you like dip into like the herpes and AIDS and all those like uncurable scary ones. That's what's scary.
Do you think that college students share their sexual history with their current partners before they have sex?
I mean, I definitely think they should, but a lot of people are more like kind of embarrassed. Like it's not like a proud thing to be like, oh, guess who I slept with, you know? So people probably don't as much as they should. Like they might need some, but I mean, sex nowadays is more common than anything. So unfortunately,
Oh dear.
I mean, some people.
This is 11 minutes, but
Yeah.
I mean, you can see where
Yeah, you can
it's
see where it's going.
It's,
Wow.
you know, that it's getting like it's about health issues and how people see health
Yeah.
issues. So
And I think what I liked the most about that video was that when I brought the topic back up in class, they immediately referred back to, oh yeah, remember when the girl was talking about the friend who got chlamydia? And they remembered that. And I said, okay, so prior to this, how many of you knew that you could have an STD and not have symptoms? And, you know, just a few people raised their hand, or that it could lead to, you know, you not being able to have children, and like one person raised their hand. So I thought it was, you know, an excellent example of something. I could have stood up there and said it, but that would have, versus.
and I think it's also like, you know, I mean, it's because they're just watching this and like peers and things like that. I think it's really, yeah, probably really, it's a real life experience, So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.